The Carolina Panthers offense is set to receive a huge shakeup. Trade season is upon us, and what will this team look like after the bye week? In this video, we are here to talk about all of those things and more, and we are going to get into all of that right after this.
From the foe, you dig?
Welcome to The Way I See It with Jamario Rashad. This is a Carolina Panthers fan channel. Please do me a favor by hitting the like button, and please make sure you subscribe as I am on my road to 3K. Trying to make sure my channel continues to grow throughout this season. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get to this video. So I'm pretty sure many of you all have been wondering my thoughts on the shakeup that is taking place within this Carolina Panthers offense with the play calling situation. Head coach Frank Reich is stepping down from his offensive play calling duties, and allowing who should have been in place the entire time, offensive coordinator Thomas Brown, to take over the duties and now be the one with the headset sending in the calls to Bryce Young and this offense. And this brings up a few thoughts, some good, some bad, but I will get through all of them in this video. So the first question that comes to mind is what exactly Thomas Brown brings to this team. Now, the first thing that jumps out to me is a much needed infusion of some youth into this offense. Now, why do I say that? There was a trend on this with this coaching staff and the way it was built over this offseason, where they seem to have hired young coordinators but elected to hire older coaches. Now, that seems to be working on the defensive side of the ball, with a younger guy like a Jiro Evero, having a older defensive assistant like Dom Capers, having older linebacking coaches, defensive line coaches. Those things are working. But when it came to the offense, you had the young guy, in theory, being Thomas Brown there, that can communicate with the older coaches, be it wide receiver coach Jefferson, be it Coach Camp, and all of these guys on the offensive side of the ball. You would think that would work just as good as what Jiro Evero and the defensive guys were doing, but it couldn't, because Frank Reich was still the one that was in charge of these things. So rather than having this infusion of youthful knowledge, this new age thinking, just supported by years of experience that can help a young coach expound upon his ideas, Frank Reich chose to rather be a roadblock for this team and stand in front of Thomas Brown and everything that he could have potentially brought. And that is something that we no longer have to worry about now that Frank Reich is out of the way. Now, secondly, he comes from experience in the NFL, from not just any program, but a winning program while he was there, that being the Los Angeles Rams. And during that time, he got to share the offensive offices, share the offensive space, being the offensive meetings, being the coaching meetings with the likes of a future Hall of Famer in Matt Stafford. Not necessarily an all-time great, but somebody that is recognized as being one of the better, one of the better quarterbacks of his time. Thomas Brown, in his 2 to 3 years prior to getting to us here with the Carolina Panthers, spent a lot of time around not only him, but a multitude of other coaches that were around that system that are now scattered throughout the league. Now, he comes from the Sean McVay tree. Now, I cannot talk about Thomas Brown without mentioning the wonder boy that is Sean McVay, who allowed for his guy to come over and now be our offensive coordinator, that just gave a glowing review and a glowing endorsement for what he thinks that Thomas Brown will be able to do for this team, not in the long term, but in the short term future as well. Now, just to list off a few names that are scattered throughout the league that were also on this coaching staff, that also come from this coaching tree of Sean McVay. You have Matt LaFleur, Joe Barry, Jiro Evero, our very own defensive coordinator, Kevin O'Connell, Wes Phillips, Brandon Staley, Zach Taylor, and Shane Waldron. These are all guys that have been hired over the last 3 or 4 years that are staples on many teams throughout the league. And now that we have our guy in place that is actually going to be able to have some power behind his title, I think that he will be able to do positive things for this team, just like the other guys that I just listed were able to do and are currently able to do for the other teams scattered throughout the league, man. But the next thing that jumps out to me in terms of why this is a positive is hearing about the absolute conviction that Thomas Brown has for Bryce Young. Now, we do not know, us being the public, exactly what went down in these meeting rooms. We only know what was disseminated to us throughout the press, what was reported on, and what continues to be reported on at this time. But there are many stories out there about how Frank Reich is, always preferred the bigger guy. And then you saw how animated and how and how accommodating and loving these guys were, be it Frank Reich and Josh McCown and other guys when they went to the when they went to CJ Stroud's pro day. One would easily be able to be convinced that this was potentially the guy that they wanted the entire time. But Thomas Brown, from the moment he even interviewed from this job, in a recent report that came out, stated that he said in his interview before even receiving the job that he had the conviction that if they had the first overall pick, that he would choose Bryce Young for various reasons that I don't need to name, because what is important to me is the simple fact that he is sold, that he has the conviction to make this work, that he doesn't have eyes elsewhere, that he does not have any fear that he missed out on anything else. He's here to work with what we have, and that is exactly what we need. We do not need to be focusing on what could have been. So hearing that he is all in on Bryce and has been from the beginning makes me want to support, and makes me support Thomas Brown even more, man. But what's most important to me in terms of something that is not necessarily going to be his overall role for the team, but something that I think is just going to be better for this offense, and especially better for a team that has majority of young players scattered throughout the roster, very few veterans. Him being an infusion of a younger voice and just being able to be so much more relatable to these young players than the likes of a Frank Reich is going to do wonders, in my opinion, solely for the morale of a team that is probably in the dumps right now, entering a bye week, 0-6, young, no first round pick, no positives in sight. You infuse a young guy that is able to, hopefully infuse some type of motivation, some type of outlook on the short future that can give a positive outlook for the long term, that can get these guys to buy back in. That's something that I believe, having a young guy that is able to speak the same language that these young guys are speaking now and be able to relate to them more. I believe that they'll be more willing to run through a wall for the likes of a Thomas Brown than they would for a Frank Reich, for things that are just somewhat out of Frank Reich's, like they're not his fault. Like, what do I mean by that? For instance, if you were privy to watching, I believe, whatever the show that the team was doing throughout training camp, throughout the early portion of the team, where they were giving us the breakdowns through the breakdown of what was happening, like our very own Hard Knocks. Basically, there was a segment on there where Frank Reich, he had everybody in a meeting room, and they're going over the principles of the team and all of this, and in a tongue-in-cheek way, trying to be as funny as he could, just trying to be relatable. He said, one thing we're gonna do is keep it 100. It got laughs throughout the room. You're like, yeah, am I getting that right? We're gonna keep it 100. Like, okay, man, I get it. You're trying to be relatable, but in actuality, to a room full of younger than 30-year-old, mostly black men, hearing keep it 100 from a 60-year-old white man doesn't mean a damn thing. Like let's just be honest, that you're speaking a language that you don't even understand, and you're trying to be relatable. Thomas Brown will not have those same problems, and I believe that is going to be something that is very positive for this team, as I mentioned, in the short-term future. Not even saying that we have to wait on this to come to fruition, maybe next season or anything like that. It's 10 games left, man. We have a lot of football left. But moving on from what I see this is like being like the positive outlook on this, the question that the next question that I have to ask about this hire, or not even a question, an observation rather, is this, in my opinion, is going to create a very awkward situation for Frank Reich. Now, why do I say that? Because at this point in time, it is very well documented, it is very well known that Ejiro Evero is receiving head coach money for his duties as the defensive coordinator. So everything on that side of the ball is going to be Evero, no matter what. We don't have to question whether or not Frank is doing that. No, he is not. So now that the offense is going to be in the hands of Thomas Brown, after this team started 0-6 under the stewardship of Frank Reich and his play calling, if it turns, not even necessarily turns around, if this team just looks better, if we fight our way out of the dumps, if we fight our way out of the potential #1 pick that we don't have next year with Thomas Brown calling the plays, I think a fair question can be asked at that point of what exactly does Frank Reich do? Oh, like, I understand that there are other coaches that don't call the plays, that aren't the defensive coordinator, that aren't the offensive coordinator. But if you've been watching the channel for any period of time, I recently dropped a video comparing Frank Reich to our former interim head coach that we had on our team last year, and Steve Wilkes. And I said that my philosophy is an effective coach has to be one of two things: either an innovator or a motivator. 0-6 just proves out the gate that he's not an innovator with the first overall pick, somebody that's supposed to be completely elite at processing. We have not been able to get a singular win under his coaching or his play calling. That being the case, we've heard Frank Reich march his way to the podium. We've heard what he has to say after the games. We've heard what he has to say to the media. We've heard his monotone speech. We've heard his almost emotionless, the emotionless way that he talks. So I cannot find it in my heart to see him as a motivator at all. So him not being an innovator nor a motivator, what exactly are you on the team to do rather than to just pick what time we come to practice? So in actuality, I think that creates a very awkward situation for Frank Reich, because as the head coach, you would assume that you want the team to do well. You want the team to succeed. You want the team to stack wins. But if that comes right after you give up your play calling duties and then the team's fortunes immediately turn around, what does that say about the impact that you were having on the team? That's a question that needs to be, that's a question that is going to be answered. And I can only imagine, man, I don't exactly know how Frank Reich is feeling at this point in time, man. Do you think that he's hoping for the best, as, an honorable, like a coach would? Or, like, do you think that subconsciously he's thinking, man, I don't need for this to look better than it did with me, because, that might be my ass. But whatever you think, man, you can leave a comment on that down in the comment section, man. But before I get to the next portion of this video, it is my pleasure to announce that The Way I See It has received its first official sponsor. We are now partnered with BetUS. Please use the link in the description of this video to receive a 125% bonus on a minimum deposit of $100 towards your bets. That means if you deposit $100, you will receive a total of $225 to bet and to possibly win your money back. Currently, that is the best way to support this channel, and anybody that chooses to do so, I truly appreciate it. And yeah, man, let's move on. Your boy got a sponsor. Things are moving up, man. So now what we are going to move into is a portion that is, like, we're going to move away from Thomas Brown. I gave my thoughts on that, but there's a few more things I want to talk about in this video. That being, now that we are 0-6 going into the bye week and it is officially trade season, who are some names that I believe would potentially or imminently be traded before the deadline? Now, if you were to ask me this question before today, my answer, or one of my two answers, would have been Jeremy Chinn, but it was news did drop today that he is unfortunately injured. I believe I don't know what the injury was, so I don't want to say anything wrong, but there is reports that he is going to be out for numerous weeks. That meaning that he probably will not be traded, because he would not be able to pass a physical upon being traded to whatever team wanted his services. But prior to hearing this news, the reason why I felt that Jeremy Chinn was going to be traded was because over these 6 weeks, you have seen what was supposed to be a very fluid, a very progressive, ever-changing role for Jeremy Chin, highlighting his versatility, which is what defensive coordinator Jiro Evero alluded to just about every time he was asked about Jeremy Chin prior to the season beginning. We have not seen that come to fruition very much throughout these six games, and his snap count has progressively been getting lower and lower. And we actually did hear a report last week that the Philadelphia Eagles had reached out to the Carolina Panthers to potentially seek the services and to see what it would cost to recoup the likes of Jeremy Chin to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, why do I think that the Carolina Panthers would be open to doing something like this? Well, with the transition to this 3-4 defense, I think that majority of people thought, including myself, thought that Jeremy Chin was going to be able to absolutely thrive in this, but so far he is somewhat being lost in the shuffle. There being guys that were just signed this offseason that have stepped up and played like almost like even more effectively than he has. One being Camus Grugier-Hill, being a linebacker, Jeremy Chin being expected to play a lot of linebacker this season. There just hasn't been a lot for Jeremy Chin to do, and even when he has been called upon to do the things, he still has struggled in pass coverage when asked to be a safety. And then, there are other issues that go along with this. So with that being the case, my thought process is the Carolina Panthers would, at the end of the season, probably come to the choice of they wanted to extend to either of these two players on the defensive side of the ball, that being between Jeremy Chin or Frankie Louvu. Frankie Louvu, who right now is on a dirt cheap contract, who has never received a big payday in his entire career and has outplayed every single red penny that we've paid to him, is going to be much more of a hot commodity on the open market, and is going to drive the market for him to desire more money, and he is going to deserve that money. But at the time, I don't think that he is a piece that, if you are a team builder, there is no way that you could ever consider trading a Frankie Louvu. Now, with there being interest in Jeremy Chin, in his versatility, there being different schemes throughout the league. Not everybody runs a 3-4. There may be a defensive coordinator that does see him at a solid position, that does see him specifically as a safety, that does see him specifically as a linebacker, and is willing to take a chance on him. The likelihood of us recouping maybe a 4th or 5th round pick to just bolster our lot of draft picks for next year, I like the prospect of that happening a lot more than just losing him for nothing, which it looks like we could potentially be doing now that he won't be here for the for the next week, for the next couple of weeks, and probably will be injured throughout the trade deadline. I believe that unfortunately we might lose him now, but my thoughts were that it was pretty much imminent that he was going to be traded before the trade deadline. Now, to kick this over to the offensive side of the ball, somebody that I think it would be an amicable split if for both sides, be it he and the team, if he were to be traded, that would be Terrace Marshall Jr. I believe that it is pretty much apparent at this point that he is not in the plans for the future. That is indicative of them going out and signing the likes of a DJ Chark, who is basically the same body type, the same type of receiver, except Terrace Marshall Jr. has the contested catches versus DJ Chark, who's known for the speed. They have the same body type, but they thought that this guy, pretty much on the market, could come in and be better than somebody whose skills we have been trying to progress for the better part of the last 4 years. That says a lot about what they think about Terrace Marshall Jr. And to take it even further than that, they then went ahead and drafted what can only be seen as his replacement in Jonathan Mingo, being another 2nd-round receiver, a rookie guy who is undoubtedly going to get the benefit of the snaps, because this is somebody that they need to learn on the fly, somebody that needs to get game experience. And with Terrace Marshall having damn near 3 or 4 years of experience that objectively was with subpar quarterback play, he himself has not been somebody that just stands out on tape, so much so that I think that he would be untradeable. He could potentially play better for another team, which would, like, in my opinion, that wouldn't hurt as much because I've seen pretty much all I need to see out of Terrace Marshall. So in my opinion, before the trade deadline gets here, I think it's a very likely chance that we trade Terrace Marshall for a later round draft pick. I'm not going to be someone that sits here and lies to you and said we're going to get, anything like a 3. We probably won't even get a 4 for what we're going to be trading him for, but I believe that will be best for both he and the team. So I think Terrace Marshall will probably be wearing another uniform post the trade deadline. Now, one last segment for the video. Hold on. I'm parched there. Let me wet my whistle. Is I want to talk about what I think this team will look like after the bye week. I don't think that the Thomas Brown change will be the only somewhat drastic change to the outlook of this team. So I think there are going to be a few other small changes that could have varying impact. The first being that I have not heard much about the progression of the recovery of Panthers outside linebacker Marquise Haynes, but he was on IR to start the season, missing the first 4 games. After the bye week, that will give him an additional 3 weeks after that, totaling 7 additional weeks to start the season when he was expected to be ready for the opener. So I expect for him to be back at that point and working his way back into the rotation. The Justin Houston experiment has been an absolute failure to this point. I have nothing but respect for the career that Justin Houston has had, but this year for the Carolina Panthers, being a starter and being expected to have a consistently impactful role has not been suited for Justin Houston. I believe that Yetur Gross-Matos will more than likely overtake that starting spot from him. If not, I believe that spot will be alternated between the likes of Yetur Gross-Matos and Marquise Haynes, more so than it would be for Justin Houston, because Justin Houston, unfortunately, is showing his age. And with that being the case, just extending this point a little bit further, with us being 0-6, I think it's fair for us to assume that the season is effectively over. There are no playoff hopes. There are no wild card hopes. There's no hope for anything except for what's the term I'm thinking about? Moral victories. There are no moral, like there's nothing to look for except for moral victories if you were still looking forward to anything on this team. That being the case, with Justin Houston, as I mentioned, being expected to have a lesser role after this, I think that we have to try in some way, shape, or form to justify the DJ Johnson pick. He has to get on the field, whether it be because he's forced out there or whether it be because he earned it. But he has to get out there and contribute something. And with the season, as I mentioned, being effectively over, why not just try it at this point, especially if there are obvious pass rush situations? If we're in, if the season continues to go where we pretty much have no shot and we can just experiment with shit on the fly, why not try DJ Johnson in that spot? Why not let Amari Barno play with the amount of snaps that I assumed he would play, with this 3-4 system being totally suited for his skill set, and him still not seeing the field that much? It's better to just experiment with the young guys, in my opinion, than to just keep trying the same old thing and watch it not play. It's better to let your younger players that could potentially still be here in the future get some game snaps, get some game experience, rather than them just watching a veteran that can't get it done anymore. So I expect for that to be a change that is quickly on the horizon following this bye week. Now, the next change that I have to point out is something that I'm not sure everybody will agree with, but in my opinion, I think it should happen, but I'm not 100% that it will happen. That being that once J.C. Horn returns, which I expect him to return after the bye week, him being reinserted back into that cornerback 1 role, I think that C.J. Henderson honestly deserves to be cornerback 2 more so than Dante Jackson. I know that I have been one that has talked a lot of shit. I have even coined him CJ Burnt Toast Henderson, but my objective opinion is that he has not been as bad as I've seen him be over these previous over this previous 2 years. And I can undoubtedly say that he has been nowhere near as bad as Dante Jackson has been as our proverbial cornerback 2. To just give you a look behind the curtain into the Dante Jackson experience currently through 5 games, which I believe he's only played 5 games, he is allowing a 157.1 passer rating allowed, 76.5 completion percentage. That is 13 of 17 completions allowed, 20 yards per catch, and he has gotten burned for 2 touchdowns in just 5 games. Not even CJ Henderson has been that damn terrible. CJ Henderson has the tendency to hold his own and then give up one big ass play, and then there seems to be a snowball after that. But Dante Jackson just goes out there and consistently gets his ass burned play after play after play. So in my opinion, Ejiro Evero, if he is evaluating what he's seeing on if he is evaluating these games the same way I am, which of course I'm just a guy on YouTube, I'm not a defensive coordinator, so of course he's probably not. But if he were, I think that he would see that CJ Henderson is much more suited for that role than Dante Jackson currently is right now. And he's just, at the moment, CJ Henderson has progressed. He's showing why somebody took a chance on drafting him in the first round, in the top 10 picks of the first round, and showing why he is expected to be better than Dante Jackson. And right now, he is better than Dante Jackson. So I believe that is a change that we could potentially see after the trade deadline. Now, the next one, I think that this will probably be a time where one of 2 players is activated off of injury reserve, that being one offensive lineman, Austin Corbett. Now, there have been a lot of debate about who is and who shouldn't be playing what position on our line, but if we are just to take the sample size of the last 10 to 12 games last year, after we traded Christian McCaffrey, with the insertion of Deontay Foreman, with the consistent, impactful power run game that we were running last year, Austin Corbett was one of the leaders on this line, and one could assume that injecting him back into this offense would directly correlate to us having an even better run game, or just as effective of a run game, or just nearly as good of a run game as we did last year, or at least something relatively close. In my opinion, I believe that is possible. I believe that the offensive line play will improve overall. Cade Mays will slide back to the bench. Chandler Zavala probably won't see the field for the rest of the year, barring any type of injury. But in my opinion, the run game will not improve if Frank Reich or whoever is in charge, whether it be Deuce Staley or Frank Reich, is in charge of this running back rotation, chooses to put Miles Sanders back as the lead back behind this offensive line. I don't think that there's blocking good enough that these guys could do that could make that guy look, serviceable. If they elect to have Chuba Hubbard stay back there and be the running back 1, then I believe the injection of Austin Corbett back into this line will be something that is very valuable and will be a cornerstone and will be a very notable addition to the change to come for this offense under Thomas Brown. And hopefully that all can work out in that way. But that is something that is still yet to be seen. But the final thing I want to talk about, or the final player I'm going to mention for this video in terms of somebody that I think we could be seeing after this bye week. I don't know if I've been saying deadline. The bye week. I think this could be the time that I mentioned in my last video, that Tariq Cohen could be activated to the active roster. Unfortunately, Laviska Shenault suffered an ankle injury last week. I'm not really sure what the timetable on that is, but he was carted off the field. So my only assumption, or I can only assume, that it is something that's relatively serious that will see him out for more than just 2 weeks, which opens up a spot in this offense for that gadget guy that currently is not on the active roster, but is perfect for the likes of a Tariq Cohen, because that's pretty much the role that he has played throughout his entire career, being somebody that can return punts, somebody that can return kicks, somebody that can make plays happen on these reverses, somebody that can play running back, somebody that can catch passes, all the things that this offense was relying on Laviska Shenault to be. I believe that Tariq Cohen could do all of those same things. And if he is anywhere near what he used to be back in 2020 before he got injured, I believe that he could be just as effective for this offense as Laviska Shenault was. So for all of those reasons, man, I think Tariq Cohen, after being signed for like 4 or 5 weeks at this point, is more than likely going to receive his call up. But I could be wrong on that, man. But that is all I have for y'all today, man. What do you all think about this video? What do you all think about Thomas Brown now being the play caller? What do you all think about potential trades? Is there somebody else that may potentially be traded? There's somebody that I didn't mention on the trade block because, of course, he's not going to be traded. He's going to be paid, and that's just my opinion. I don't care what you say. But what do you all think about how are we going to look after the trade after the trade deadline, after the bye week? After all of these changes are expected to go down, man, what do you expect the Carolina Panthers to look like, man? Leave your comments down in the comments section. And before I get out of here, I just want to remind you again, this video is brought to you by BetUS. Please use the promo link. Click the promo in the description of this video to get 125% on your initial deposit of at least $100. And with that being said, man, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here because I've taken enough of your time. I am Jamario Rashad. This is the way I see it, and I'm out. Peace.